Hi, and welcome back to Rainbow. These are our Level 2, Week 1 and 2 lesson plans. First, we have our vault stations. Our first station will be a proper hurdle drill, and there'll be 2 setups. Each student will have their own set of colorful blocks, and they're going to work on their hurdle. So they'll run, hurdle over the red and yellow, trying to land 2 feet on the black block. Our next station will be a setup with 2 different activities. So the first will be running and pushing the block, keeping their arms straight and trying to run as fast as they can. Then they will sanitize their station and hands and switch to our second activity, which will be working on their proper hurdle straight jump onto a stack of mats. They're working on keeping their legs straight all the way up onto the mat and landing on 2 feet. Our next station will be a double setup. Each student will have their own mat and board, and they're going to be working on their heel drive. So hands on the mat, keeping their arms straight, and they're going to bounce 2 feet up, trying to make it to handstand. Our last station will also be a double setup. Each student will have their own mat to lay on, and they'll be working on their arch holds, feet together and arms by their ears, keeping their legs straight. Floor stations. Our first station will be a double setup. The students will each have their own mat, and we're going to be working on their straight arm forward roll. So they'll start on the floor, hands on the floor, and they'll lean to the mat, trying not to let their arms bend as they roll and stand. Our next station will also be a double setup. The students will each have their own thick Velcro line, and they're going to work on their backward roll to push up, trying to push their arms straight, keeping their core tight into that nice push-up position. Our next station will be a double setup. Each student will have their own line to work on their broken leg kick, starting on a lunge, ears covered, kicking, showing a nice big split, keeping their ears covered, and finishing in a lunge. If they're ready, they may move on to handstand. And then our last station, the students will be at their own spot working on their lunge switches. So starting in their lunge, ears covered, then they'll jump and switch to their lunge, keeping their arms by their ears. Bar stations. Our first station will have 2 setups. The students will be working on a push-up hold, feet on the block and hands on the bar, trying to count to 10, keeping a flat back. Our next station will also be a double setup. The students will each have their own bar with a high block, and they'll jump to front support, keeping their arms straight and their legs together, and then they'll be working on their casting, trying to do 3 in a row, getting their hips off the bar. Our next station will also be a double setup. Each student will have their own noodle, and we're going to be working on our hollow hold, keeping the noodle on our thighs, our legs straight, and our chest round. Our last station will be 2 separate activities. The first one will be working with a coach on our chin-up pullover, working towards independence, trying to get all the way to our front support on our own. Then after sanitizing, they will switch to the second activity, where they're going to be working on their pike hold. They'll sit between our parallettes with their legs straight and trying to lift their bottom and their feet off of the ground. Beam stations. Our first station will be on the side beam with 1 student on each end of the beam with the block in between. They won't go past it. They'll be working on their V-sit mount. So they'll sit, show their V-sit, then bend 1 foot, 1 knee, and stand 1 foot at a time into a finish. Our next station will be on the back beam, and the students will be on opposite ends of the beam with the cones in between, and they're going to be working on their passe, developpe, and then swinging to an arabesque, trying to show each position and holding. Our next station will be on the red beams. Each student will have their own beam, and they're going to be working on their tuck jump and their split jump. So they'll have 1 foot in front, swing, show their tuck, knees to their belly, and then they'll show their split, arms out to the side, legs straight. Our last station will be 2 separate activities. So the first one will be standing on the circle board and trying to hold their arabesque, 1 leg out behind them, keeping both legs straight. They can try this on both feet. And then after sanitizing, they'll switch to the high beam, where they'll be working on complex with a coach, starting with forward releve and progressing as they're ready.